Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. We are going to have a very interesting show for you today. If you're watching, you can see me. You won't see my guest, but you're going to hear my guest because we're going to keep their identity a secret. Today, I'm joined by the Director of Investigative Intelligence at the Shepard's Watch Foundation. She goes by Lisa for anonymity. Shepard's Watch is a nonprofit organization started by private investigators that target sex trafficking rings, specifically focused in Texas. As I said, we're not going to have Lisa's face on camera, but Lisa, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much for having me.
What you're doing is fascinating, but it's a world that so few people really understand. And I think it's a world that could affect any of us at any time. But I think a lot of parents are sort of naive to exactly what's happening. So can you explain to us what you're doing and what you're seeing in the United States?
Well, trafficking, of course, you would think that the numbers were going down because we have a closed border. We have a lot of education programs. We have a lot of nonprofits that are working in the counter-trafficking movement. But what we're seeing is the numbers are actually going up. We used to see about 1,300 plus sex ads a day where they sell humans for sex. Many of them are young women.
Where are you seeing, you say you see these ads, sorry to cut you off, but
yes.
Where do you see that? I mean, that's shocking to me.
Well, you'd be shocked to know that it's not just on the dark web. I mean, these are ads that are easily accessible online. Some of these ads come through Facebook. Some of the ads come through TikTok. Some of the ads come through X platform. The ads are out there. They're easily accessible. The numbers, we have software, proprietary software that basically goes out and monitors these platforms and pulls in the ads for different areas so we can concentrate on different areas or regions of the United States to find out, look at the ebb and flow of the trafficking patterns and to see what's considered to be a hot spot. We create heat maps with that intelligence to show the concentrated areas and if it's moving and changing like within Texas. But we averaged like Dallas and surrounding counties, it was 1,300 a day and change. It grew to 1,400 and by January 2025, we were at 1,500 sex ads a day. And as of 2 weeks ago, I'm at 1,700. So my numbers are not going down, they're going up, which tells me it is a supply and demand issue. But there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money connected to these sex trafficking operations. And
these are people of all ages, or I mean, I don't even know.
Yes.
I can't even comprehend when you say a sex ad, I can't even comprehend what that is. So can you break that down for us? What that looks like?
The ads are going to be anything from illicit massage businesses. They're so popular now that there's more illicit massage businesses than there are Starbucks. You can go into certain areas of the Dallas Metroplex and there's one on every corner. It's crazy. Sometimes you'll have two in the same retail shopping center. And some of these illicit massage businesses are actually right next to schools where there's kids. So you'll have, sex addicts and predators walking in and out of these locations right next to an area where there's children crossing the parking lot. So you have those ads and those ads populate quite a few times a day. And then you'll have sex trafficking rings. And our average ring is about 20 girls. And those are going to be cross-platformed. And it can pertain to anything that it could focus on ethnic trafficking, which might be you're looking for a certain type of girl or nationality. It can be straight, gay, trans trafficking, all ages, all ethnicities. It's out there.
So are these the people who are the victims, the people who are being trafficked? You said the border's closed, so we would think it's going down. Is it generally people that have been brought across the border, or are we seeing people that are American citizens involved in this too?
Well, it's both. The numbers of the ethnic rings have not gone down. Migrant trafficking rings have not gone down for us. It's still a supply and demand issue. When you're looking at $120 for every 15 minutes for sex, that's a lot of money. Average girl in a ring of 2025 is making about $1 million a year. they're not keeping that. Of course, it's going back to transnational criminal organizations, but so that's not going to stop. You have a lot of money that's at stake. They have no interest in slowing down. Then you also see the domestic trafficking as well. I think the things that have kind of disturbed us lately within the last year, the trend of the grooming online and focusing on autistic children and bringing them into the trafficking rings, which was really disturbing for us and heartbreaking. And those numbers have not decreased either. So unfortunately,
how do they get those kids? I mean, how do you get a domestic child? Because call me naive, but when I think about this, I think of all of these hundreds of thousands of kids that went missing, that came across the border, that went missing. And I think, well, maybe that's where these kids are. But how are you recruiting kids that are, like you said, autistic kids that are American citizens? Are they finding them online? Are they putting out some sort of a trigger for a kid that seems like, oh, I'm missing something, I'll connect with these people? How do they get them?
Well, I think in domestic trafficking, it's a little bit different than the migrant trafficking because most of those girls are paying and boys are paying off homage to crossing over. It's their penance for coming across the border to the cartels. But with the domestic kids, the kids that are groomed online, like on gaming Discord, it's extremely dangerous. And, until we have legislation that locks down a solid pathway to put these guys in prison for the rest of their life or registered as offenders for the rest of their life, we're going to continue to have that issue. They focus on the autistic children because they have a problem understanding stranger danger. Very smart, very intelligent, just don't have some of the social cues that probably puts them in a easier victim category. But gaming Discord's very dangerous. We've seen them focusing on kids that are as young as 9, 10.
Oh.
So that is one way to lure them away. They lure them away from their families. They get them to ditch their devices, digital devices, tracking devices. Some of these kids were groomed for 2-3 years by people online. Sometimes it's a shorter period of time. If they know that they're close to the age of 17, in the states where you can consent for sex at 16 or 17, then those predators will wait until they turn over what's called a legal age. Even if a child is mentally 13 years old and emotional intelligence, this is prime for them. That makes them an easy target. Another way that they're getting the domestic kids is, listen, I mean, when you're looking at recruiters being female and you've got friends that will say, hey, they're online friends, meet me over here, or somebody they meet at a party or they meet at a track meet, you'd be surprised how they start luring these kids into these rings. And the traffickers know. And they use other children and they use older teenagers as recruiters for recruitment.
Then these kids are actually leaving home and they're disappearing, or what happens to them once they've been recruited?
Well, I mean, you're going to have multiple different scenarios. You have foster children that get sucked into this vortex. You have children that come from broken homes. You have kids that come from great homes. You have kids that have drug problems. You have kids that did not have drug problems that get put on drugs once they get put into these rings. Kids that are preyed upon because maybe they're convinced that they're trans or they're convinced that they're homosexual or bi. Kids that have social awkwardness. They find the weak link in the armor, and that's where they focus on them. They're predators. And so they find that weak link, and that's what they do to lure them into these rings. And once they're in these rings, it's difficult for them to get out unless they make an outcry or they have an opportunity to break away.
When you say they're in them, though, are they sleeping there? Is there a house? I mean, this is so hard for me to envision what exactly happens in a trafficking ring.
Well, you'd be surprised what the trafficking rings are. I mean, we have trafficking rings that are in $1 million neighborhoods, gated communities, women that are held hostage in IMBs that live in the back quarters of an illicit massage business that never leave there. We have kids that are living in everyday homes. We have hotels. We have Airbnbs. We have motels. We've seen motel operations running trafficking rings in the same location For 8 months. We have technology where we can see that information that they have actually been in that location for 8 months. So that's crazy to me that you've got minors going in and out of a motel and no alarm bells are going off. And that's happening all over the United States. It's not just in Texas.
So how do you bust these? How do you find them? How do you get in there?
Well, what we do is we are considered to be informants. So our heroes to us are going to be law enforcement and first responders, fire marshals. I mean, all the people that can go out there and make the difference. What we do is we build what's called a target pack. And that information comes from a cross-platform of tools that we use, technology. And once we gather the information of locating where the ring is, we have the sex ads, we have the rings, location. We set up, if it is a safe situation, we'll set up a surveillance situation to gather information and intel. And we hand that off to law enforcement, and they create the probable cause for what they need to do, so that they're following all the correct pathways, I's and T's dotted. The district attorneys know who we are, but they don't know what cases we work on. But basically, we sit here and we support law enforcement with as much information that we can give them so that they can do their job. Because an NGO person does not have jurisdiction to so-called bust a ring. So that's a fallacy. You don't ever want to do anything that's going to interfere with an investigation or throw an investigation because of your involvement. We let law enforcement do their job. They're very capable, they're very smart, they're very talented. They have all the right tools and equipment and the people and the training. What we have to do is help shorten that gap of time, because these are so prevalent and in so many different places. Think of Shepard's watch walking into the minefield with a flashlight going, there's a mine, there's a mine, there's a mine. And that's what we do.
Stick around. We've got more coming up with Shepard's Watch, but first I want to talk to you about my partners at American Alternative. Markets are experiencing extreme volatility. They've got brief rallies quickly erased by sharp sell-offs, and the dollar continues to weaken on the international markets, but gold has surged to new all-time record highs. Wall Street analysts are warning of persistent market stress and advising their biggest clients to seek safety now. So when markets swing this violently, your retirement savings are extremely vulnerable. And it's during these uncertain times that people need stable assets. For thousands of years, that asset has been gold. And that's why I'm proud to endorse American Alternative Assets. They take a different approach to precious metals. They get to know you, your family, and your needs. They know precious metals protection is not for everyone, and that's why they only work with the people that they know they can help. They provide quarterly check-ins to ensure your strategy stays on track, and 30% of their customers return and refer friends and family. American Alternative Assets is offering our listeners a free wealth protection guide and up to 5% bonus on your first purchase. Call 877-522-GOLD or visit tudorsgold.com now. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your wealth and secure your future today. That's 877-522-GOLD or visit tudorsgold.com. Now stay tuned. We've got more after this. The Attorney General's office in Texas says that there were 1.6 million online commercial sex ads in 2020, and they believe 223,910 children were involved. How could that number be so high in just one state? And what does it look like nationwide?
Well, I think that Texas has replicated, all over the United States. The trafficking rings don't stop here. So, if we see a big ring, especially one that's tied to a criminal organization, it never stays in Texas. There will be trafficking that's also, coming out of Texas to Cincinnati, Ohio. It'll go to Nashville. It'll go to Atlanta. It'll go to Florida, California, New York, New Jersey. It goes all over the United States. I think Texas has had such a problem because we have been a border state. I think we are a humongous state with a lot of revenue coming in and out. We have a lot of tourism that comes in and out. And we have, our share of TCOs here. So that's going to create a petri dish and an environment for this to grow. And I do think that there's effort being made. But unfortunately, they have counterintelligence moves, and they have the bodies and the rings and the money. So you're always playing catch up with these guys.
We always hear about sex trafficking increasing around Super Bowl time and big sporting events. Is that something that you watch for?
Yes, and that's 1000% correct. And the reason for that is anytime that you have a conference, an event, a rodeo, you're going to see a big spike number, even NASCAR, baseball games, football games, soccer. You're going to see a spike in those numbers. Unfortunately, there's people that, that's their predilection is, younger boys, younger girls. Um, it's very, very sad.
What is the age? I mean, what's the average age for someone who's in one of these rings?
The average age of what we see is anywhere between 14 and 17. It can go all the way up to, 23, 24. By the time they're 25, they've kind of aged out. We see online code. When you talk about where are these people, where are these children? When I talk about the counterintelligence moves, I'm not going to give too much information here because I don't want to tip them off, but we do watch the ads. We do watch the lingo. We do watch the patterns of how they traffic and what they put into the ads. It was, maybe 5, 6 years ago, it was easily identified more so then than it is now because they got smarter as we increased the counter trafficking movement. They got more creative on where they place these ads that have kids, how they place the ads, what lingo they use. They cover them with their face with an emoji. You don't see the kids nude. You'll see them in a bathing suit. It's very interesting, but they're still there. A lot of times the kids are buried within the rings. So you might see an ad for somebody that's so-called 22 years old, but embedded in that ring is a 14-year-old.
Good grief. So do you ever have parents come to you and say, we're looking for our child? Have you seen them?
All the time.
How does that work? Tell me about that.
Well, we have people who have, intercepted communications between their child and a predator. And a lot of times they have filed missing kid report, or if a child is 17, they might be considered a runaway versus an active missing case. We are moving towards working with law enforcement. A lot of law enforcement officers are very cooperative with us so that we can mark these kids as endangered. If it's a kid that has an inhaler, if it's a kid that's spectrum disorder, if it's a kid that has a disability, we will immediately have them marked endangered. If they're a minor, they get marked endangered. That's critical when it comes to looking for missing children. If they are on that age, delimiter of like 17, sometimes you get a little bit more pushback because they're of the age of consent. So, that's where it's important to give up the conversations or give up the reasons of why you think they're being trafficked. But, we get calls all the time. It could be anything from the grooming and exploitation online that's coming from somebody that's trying to traffic a kid to, parents that maybe a child has had a substance abuse problem. Maybe they are a runaway. Maybe they're a foster kid that's, constantly running away. Or maybe it's a kid that this is just absolutely not their normal behavior. They would not turn off their phone. They would not leave and not contact mom and dad. We get all those calls. I mean, it's been a crazy wild ride in the last 2 years.
So is it oftentimes a parent who's been told by the police, your child ran away, there's, this is their choice, we're not able to chase them down, and they go to you and say, no, this wasn't their choice, something weird happened?
Yes. I mean, because you have to understand that, that there's laws that they have to abide by too. So, I mean, we can get mad at law enforcement, but what we really need to be doing is pushing back on legislation. 17-year-olds are still in high school. So, when you talk about the age of 17, what are the two things that 17-year-olds can do? Well, guess what? It's to be tried for capital murder and consent for sex. You can't vote, right? Oh, you can drive. You can't vote. You can't get an apartment. You can't get a credit card. You can't join the military. There's all these things you can't do at 17, but then you can do these things over here. So that makes no sense to me. I mean, this is high school age. And
But
I'm not, I think, I
yeah,
don't think
so you've been talking about 17, but 17, I mean, it's still illegal to traffic a 17-year-old. It's just that they can get away with it because they can say they're agreeing to this. Or how does that, I mean, Why is that the magic number for what they're doing?
It's a tricky age, and there's a lot of 17-year-olds on the street for that reason, because, when it's a child, they can't consent. So there's no way that that's legal to have sex with a child, and that's going to be under the age of 17. At 17, if they are saying that they're consenting, they have to make an outcry as a victim, because you can't go under the clause of they are not of legal age. So that's when you're really proving a trafficking case. But we do need to move on legislation. I'm not saying that the 17-year-olds that are coming out of high school to go off and have a college sweetheart, and we're starting to enact, statutory rape laws and things like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if it's a trafficking situation and they're 17, that should be considered a minor. And I think that would really actually boost a lot of issues with the calls that we get for 17-year-olds that have either been targeted or that are missing.
So how do you do that? Because we've got Democrats, and I've even heard some Republicans, lawmakers who are saying we want to reduce the age of consent. So does that have to be a totally separate law that says if you are a teenager and how do you differentiate between being trafficked and consent with a boyfriend? Is there a way to write that law so that you can protect these kids?
I'd really like to know why they want to reduce that age.
I agree.
And this is a bipartisan issue, and it shouldn't be Democrat or Republican. I've never known a sex predator to ask a child how their parents voted. I've never known them to ask a victim, how did you vote before they raped them? So in my book, at 17, at 16 years old, these are still kids.
Mm.
And if, you can't sit here and tell me that it's okay for them to run around to be trafficked, or to consent to being raped, which is what it is in my book, versus, then why aren't you letting them vote? So, we have to be really careful with this. And I don't know why anybody would want to move that age bracket, because, we have a lot of teenagers out there that are being trafficked right now. And it's for this very reason. It's for this very argument. Especially if it's somebody that's on the spectrum, that has the emotional intelligence of a 13-year-old. That's just, I can't wrap my mind around that, why anybody would want to argue that. I think that we should be protecting our kids, let them graduate from high school, let them make decisions after that. Are you going to have cases where it's going to be tough because you don't have an outcry for a victim? Sure. We're going to bang our heads up against the wall on those. But we're never going to stop trying. And we're never going to give up.
It seems like there's a lot of shame around this issue. And the United States doesn't talk about it much. I don't hear it. I'm in the political world. I don't even hear it from Republicans who are very vocal about protecting kids coming out and saying, we have a massive trafficking problem in this country. I think we're second in the nation for or second in the world for sex trafficking. Isn't that right?
Yeah. If you think about it, it used to be sex tourism took place in the Philippines and Thailand, and I'd guarantee you that it takes place here now.
That's shocking.
It is, and I don't know. I think the most simplistic way that I can put this is we have a heart problem. We have a heart problem with humanity. Why in the world would we not want to protect our kids 1,000% from this happening to them? And why would we ever want to protect somebody that would be a sexual predator to our children? That is something, we have a heart problem. We have to change that mindset.
Stay tuned for more of my conversation with Shepard's Watch, but first, let me tell you about my new partners at Ease Health. Today is a new day, and now you can replace your overpriced, lousy Obamacare with Ease for Everyone, the only group plan that any adult in the United States is now eligible to join. With Ease, you get a monthly cost as low as $262. Plus, you get free unlimited prescriptions. 93% of all drugs covered are available at no extra cost, including insulin, with huge savings on brand names. You'll also get free unlimited virtual primary care visits, unlimited urgent care visits with a $30 copay, and generous cash back reimbursements for emergency room visits, ambulance transportation, and doctor's visits. You can have affordable healthcare for as low as $262 a month today. Visit easeforeveryone.com/tutor and join today. That's easeforeveryone.com/tutor. More coming up after this. You brought up autism, and I think that we've started to see in the past year that there are people out there exploiting that group of children for multiple different reasons. But I think you made a good point. They can be influenced because part of what they deal with as an autistic human is that they don't always understand social cues and what someone is they don't perceive what the next step is necessarily in a relationship. And that's where someone who is dangerous can trick that person into doing something else. Do you think that we have, as a society, been too lax about protecting the kids that are the most vulnerable too? I mean, it's like there's this attitude of kids can make their own choices. Kids don't have to be protected. Kids are just as mature as adults. And regardless of whether you have autism or you are just the average 16-year-old kid, I mean, in the state of Michigan, I can't even get my kids' medical records after they turn 12 years old. They have to allow me to see their medical records. Why are we at this point where we are trying to force kids into being little adults when they're just not ready for that?
Well, we've stripped away their innocence. We've stripped away their ability to be children. We're trying to fast track them growing up. And so, yeah, in one sense, we want to make them autonomous at the age of, 12 and 13 years old. And I think that's insanity.
Yeah.
Why aren't you having them marry at 12 and 13, right? I mean, this is insanity. So, we have a heart problem and we have to peel this back and dial this back on so many different layers. But if you continue to push kids to be adults, their minds can't wrap around. They're not developed mentally, emotionally, spiritually at that point in their life to make those types of decisions. And that's why historically we haven't given them that platform to make those decisions. They don't have the emotional intelligence of 12 and 13 as the same as somebody that's 18 years old. It's just not there.
That's funny because that's scientifically proven. However, people don't want to talk about scientifically proven facts when it's for some reason inconvenient to them. And you make a great point. Why aren't they getting married? But I mean, if you're an adult at 12, why aren't you going out into the workforce? Why do you still have at least 6 more years of school left? It's just crazy. It's insanity. How do we flip this back? What happens when some of these kids are pulled out of these rings? What is the torture that they've been through? What is the torture that they go through to try to recover from this?
Well, I think that's a big question for victim restoration people, and we align with a lot of those guys, and they have a very tough job. You're having to basically rebuild someone that's broken. I would say that psychologically, mentally, emotionally, there's some things there that are going to take some time to rebuild. If you get somebody that's been trafficked for a year, you probably have, depending upon that person or that child, you probably have a better chance of recovery than someone that's been trafficked for, 5 years, 10 years. That's a long road. I've looked at kids, deadpan in the face, and I've looked at adults that were trafficked for, 5, 10 years. It's a very blank stare. It's very sad. I mean, we've killed their soul. So, we should be treating this topic with the utmost full force shield around these kids, and we're not doing it. And I don't know why. I don't know why we're not putting the legislation out there. I don't know why we're not upholding to it. And I don't know why we're giving any wiggle room when it comes to the registration of sex offenders. That should never be removed off that table. You want to play with parole, probation, or time sentencing as a district attorney because you're getting a plea bargain and you're getting information about drugs or other rings or other bad acts. That's one thing. But that registration as a sex offender, that should be there for their lifetime. Never let them go.
There has been this glorification of selling your body. And I say that in all seriousness because we see these young women who are influencers, and I even struggle to use that word because They have decided to go online and they'll say, I'm going to have sex with 1,000 men in one day. I'm breaking the world record for the number of men you can have sex with in one day. It's glorified. People are sharing it all over the internet. Can you believe it? This woman did this. Then you've got another woman challenging her. You have men lined up around the block to sleep with someone who has just had sex with hundreds of men before that boy. And they're we checked their IDs to make sure they're over 17. How did we get to this point where, I mean, I always knew social media would become an ugly place. It's ugly for multiple reasons. But the thought of selling your body this way, but then these women, they talk about how they've done this, they've broken world records, they've gotten paid for this. Then they take you on a tour of their multi-million-dollar home and say, I'm glad that I have this large body count. That's what they're calling it. Yes, if you don't know, these women who are out there glorifying having sex with hundreds of men in a day, call it their body count, almost like they're proud of it. And they're making massive amounts of money off of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a heart problem.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at, sex addiction, which is, the same driving forces as alcohol addiction, drug addiction, gambling addiction, it's an addiction. I mean, we've seen predators that will hit, 10 massage parlors looking for one girl. And, you sit outside in the parking lot and you'll see guys coming out in scrubs that are doctors. You'll see professional people. It's not what people think. And they're utilizing these services. They know that those women probably are not getting treated right. And those women are allowing them to do anything that they want to them. They're predators. It's a sex addiction. And we've become complacent with this. It's just kind of been okay. Look at the music industry, look at retail industry, and look at clothes for kids. I see some of these kids walk around in some of these outfits. I'm like, hey, mom and dad.
Yeah.
I know they didn't go into the store and buy this. What's up with that? I mean, that's not okay. But, when you look at some of the sports bars, I mean, somebody needs to answer me why I need my food brought to me with somebody that's got lingerie on. I mean, I've been into locations in North Texas that, just minus the strip pole, it's a strip club. I mean, I don't even know how it got past our Economic Development Board and Planning and Zoning.
It's
I don't
so
even know how it
interesting
got
because
past the health department.
my girls are middle and high school, and they've talked about that. It's hard to even buy clothes today. It's hard to find clothes that meet dress code for their schools because the clothes that they're making for young girls are, quite frankly, they're just slutty. They're just terrible. And the shorts are too short. They've got these tops that are crop tops. You're right. It's a societal problem. And it's hard to say how do you solve this without the community solving it? It's not a legal issue. It really is a heart issue. So you have to come around as a community and say, we are going to change things. I think you just blew my mind, though, when you said in the middle of the day, you've got professionals and people in scrubs walking into these places and having sex with kids. I mean, I'm totally shocked and horrified.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I sat there with actually it was with a journalist. And she said, well, who goes into these places? And I said, well, just sit here for a minute. And, we had this guy, very good looking guy, obviously a doctor, came out and he had his, scrubs on and he still had his hat on. And I said, well, he's probably headed back to work. And she said, what makes you say that? And I said, usually they take their hat off when they're done for the day. And, you just have, it's almost like you have this half sick giggle because I can't make this stuff up. It's like, this is what you see. And it is disturbing. And I don't know that we can really necessarily solve the trafficking problem overnight, but I think we have to solve what we condone, what's our lever of okay. It's, to me, it's not okay to go into a sports bar where girls are 18 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, and you've got older men groveling over some young girl that's standing there in a thong and a see-through bra. And I'm like, this isn't a strip joint. It's supposed to be a restaurant bar. So why is this okay? This is in the middle of the suburb. This is right next to big corporations, and that parking lot's packed.
And that's why we said, no, we shouldn't have little kids at a drag club that is a sexual drag club. You shouldn't have little kids dressed in drag having sexual emotions in front of adults. This is all of this. It's not a discriminatory thing. It's to protect kids. We should be able to talk reasonably about protecting kids. And I think, like, as you're talking about this, I know we're out of time. I just want to say this last thing. As we're talking about this, I think about a few weeks ago, we went to the White House and they had the mugshots up of the people who had raped and murdered people. And the news media was outraged, saying, how could you possibly put these people's faces on camera? Well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe more of that is the answer. I mean, if this guy is so bold as to go into this place in the middle of the day and have sex with a child, probably actually has a wife at home, then let's put his picture up. I really think that's the point that you have to get to shame people into saying, you know what, it's so taboo, it's so wrong, it's so disgusting. I never want to have my picture out there. I never want to be that person that does it, because obviously they think it's okay, but I bet they wouldn't like people to know they're doing it.
Well, I think that's true. And I think that it comes back to bringing people back to center. Adults can consent and do whatever they want to. You know, you guys want to have a fetish ball, you guys want to dress up in this, you want to do that. You can consent. You're an adult. Leave kids alone. And let's dial this all the way back, that let's not even go to the borderline age, because you're too close to the age of non-consent. Leave kids alone. Let teenagers be teenagers. Leave them alone. And you know, when you look at a parking lot that's full, that's going into an establishment, and these guys are, you know, falling all over and making inappropriate, and, you know, we know trafficking goes on in these places. We've caught it, but watching their behavior, you know, while they're on their lunch hour, and you're right, some of them are married, I'm sure, it's not okay. And when we've got a heart problem where we think that it's okay to act lewd towards a child, act lewd towards someone because we're in a bar environment, act lewd towards someone as they're walking down the street, or an ad, or promoting that, we got to start peeling that back and realizing how dangerous that is. And, you know, online behavior, online grooming, throw the book at these guys. I know that they're making big changes in Florida, big changes in Carolina. I know they're making big changes all over with anti-grooming bills, and it's for this reason. We have to start stopping it at the bud and cutting these guys off and making it known that this is not okay anymore. What we were allowing, it's not okay.
There is no punishment harsh enough for someone who goes after a child. And just so people understand, there are folks, I mean, there was a congressman who was caught doing this and protected. There are people all across the country at all different walks of life who, what they will do is they will groom for years. 2-3 years until that kid turns of consent age. But that child's mind has already been, as far as I'm concerned, that grooming process is already abusive. They should already be held accountable for that, because it doesn't matter that the kid went from 18 to 19, 16 to 17. Their mindset is still a child, and they have manipulated them until they got what they wanted. And it is twisted, it is sick, and there's no punishment harsh enough.
Oh, I agree. I mean, when you look at the numbers of students and teachers, having inappropriate sexual contact, grooming, child exploitation, just this last year, the numbers are booming, you know, skyrocketing. But, you know, if we approach this as it being a problem for all of us, and it's not, you know, one-sided politically, and it can't be weaponized. And I correct people all the time, you know, and I've got people on both sides of the fence fighting this right now, both Democrat and Republican. And when they start lashing out at each other, I just respond back to say, and what have you done? What legislation have you passed? What have you done? Did you get off the X? Were you afraid of offending the people that were at your table? I would say be offended. I protect kids. And that's what it comes down to. We've got to, that is our number one commodity. That is our future of tomorrow. That is how we are going to grow old peacefully. That is our future. That's who's going to lead our country. And this is how you're treating them. And this is what you're making okay. And it's not okay.
Absolutely. Lisa from Shepard's Watch, thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on this podcast, the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time. Have a blessed day.